Dave Burke. We're here in the trenches at the First Star Logistics Studios with Dave Lapham, the man himself. And Dave, first off, podcast, the video cast have been great. It's been great content. I think Bengals fans, Reds fans, fans of all different sports are enjoying them from what we're seeing in the numbers as far as the views and the listens. We have to get your take on some things sometimes. And I want to talk about the recent Bengals rookie minicamp that took place down at Paul Brown Stadium. And I know you had a chance to be there. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what you saw out of this new group of rookies that are wearing the stripes now.
Yeah, well, as you know, Dave, it was just T-shirts and shorts, underwear ball, as I like to call it. So it's almost like you get your draft presents, and they're all wrapped up. So you bring them to a rookie minicamp, you start to unwrap them, and then see, once they're assembled, does it match what you saw on tape when you get your hands on them on a football field? And they're not doing a whole lot of football as such in terms of no helmets, no shoulder pads, no contact, all that sort of thing. But to see the athletes out in the field, in the flesh, and to see, is Jamar Chase as athletic as you thought? Yeah, he is. The guy, his lower body looks like a fullback to me. He's got such a strong lower body, but he runs like a 4.3, 4.40. So he's a unique combination. Short space quickness, long speed. He's got it all. Plus, he's got a strong upper body, and you haven't seen it yet. They're not doing a lot of bump and run and putting hands on people, but watching tape, and I think it's going to translate as I see him run his routes. He has this move where he'll run a route and do a jump to a hop, like a jump step, and be able to cut it either way. And he cuts, just on a dime. It's unbelievable how he can change direction. The other thing is his upper body is so strong. He'll throw defensive backs around when they do try to get their hands on him and reroute him. And then he'll also, if he arm bars, on the deep balls, he'll just stick an arm out there, and it's unbelievably strong. He'll get that little last-minute separation on a subtle nudge and arm bar people, and I think he's going to be the real deal. I think he's extremely legitimate. Watching him run his routes and all that, he's very talented in that regard. So I think they feel like once they unwrap that present, watching him on the football field, they were pleased with what they saw. All three of the offensive linemen, really all you're looking for is footwork, and can they sink at their instead of bending at the waist, are they knee benders? You want to keep your pad level low without bending at the waist. You want to bend at your knees. You want to be able to sink your hips. And can they do that? What's their footwork like? Everything in athletics starts with your feet, ends with your hands. Whether it's hitting a baseball, catching a ball, shooting a ball, whatever it may be. Same thing with blocking and tackling, but same thing. Starts with your footwork. Can you get yourself in position to block properly with good feet? And then can you finish with your hands? So in a lot of the drills that they were doing with Frank Pollock, it was, he's got legitimate feet. There's no question that you can see that Jackson Carman has got some sweet feet. He's got very, very light on his feet. He almost, I think, has to worry about being too light on his feet sometimes. Make sure you're anchored, probably because he's a big-bodied, strong guy. And then others like Deontay Smith, he's got like 36-inch arms, and that was obvious. That was apparent. He's got some length to him, and he's got good footwork. So, it looks like all the guys, Trey Hill, the center guard, they all perform the techniques well. They all have good enough feet where they can block in the National Football League. They can get themselves in position to block and finish and make plays in that regard. And then the defensive lineman, the one guy that I think is going to be interesting to watch, Tyler Shelvin. This dude, legit 350 pounds. I'm telling you, Dave, he can move. He's not a big-bodied stiff. This kid is explosive. He's got a very quick first step. You can see that he's got serious ability to move laterally, up the football field, penetrate, get down the line of scrimmage. Watching tape on him, he wasn't on the ground very much, and I can see why. Because he's not a 350-pound dolt. He's a 350-pound athlete. He's got some skills to him. So I was impressed watching him. And then on the edge, Wyatt Hubert. This kid from Kansas State, Now, they were hitting sleds. They were exploding, snapping their hips, rolling their hips, coming off and hitting sleds. He's got some explosion to him. All the defensive linemen did. Osai did. Every one of them looked good, coming off the ball and exploding into the sled. This kid, though, as a 7th-round pick, if he gives them 10 to 12 to 15 snaps a game as an edge rush guy and then special teams play, there's great value in that pick. So I think that they were pleased with what they saw, from top to bottom of the draft, the first pick to the last pick of the draft and everything in between. But again, it's very early. It's underwear ball, no equipment yet, miles to go before they rest. But I think the first test, the eyeball test, when you laid your eyeballs on them, match what you saw on tape, the way they performed in games at the collegiate level. And I think in almost all cases it did.
One area, Dave, I want to ask you about is special teams. You brought that up. But the Bengals draft a kicker, and they also signed Drue Chrisman, a local product out of Cincinnati LaSalle High School at Ohio State, as a punter. First off, talk about, can Drue Chrisman challenge Kevin Hubert at the punter position?
Well, I think, Kevin Huber's at that stage of his career where, it's a year-to-year proposition. And just like any position group, you have a guy like Tom Brady that kind of breaks the mold and continues to perform at a high level, even at a very advanced age. But, it happens with linemen, happens with running backs, happens with receivers. You get to a certain point of their career, and it's not a gradual decline. Sometimes it's falling off a cliff. And, if that does happen, and it doesn't show, there's no signs of it yet with Kevin Hubert. He's still able to kick the ball very effectively. He's still got plenty of leg strength. That all of that hasn't fallen off a cliff. But I think they want to make sure that they have people evaluated, where if there is a need to say, "Boy, I gotta make a move here and do something," at least they know guys like Chrisman that they've seen put their own hands on him and seen him perform. They have somebody that they can contact and bring into the mix right away. That's not to say that if he has an unbelievable camp, it's a National Football League means the old moniker "not for long." Some guys last longer than others, but everybody's career comes to an end. So it's competition every single year, and Kevin Hubert understands that for sure.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realize self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
And how do you feel about what you saw out of the place kicking from the rookie that they drafted? And maybe surprised a lot of people that they actually drafted someone.
Yeah, they took McPherson in the 5th round, and he was the only kicker drafted. And Darren Simmons, when he was down there at the pro day for McPherson down in Florida, he had a very, very good day, a very effective day kicking the football. There were a lot of special teams coaches down there, and the buzz was that he was the one that was targeted by everybody. He was the one that was going to get drafted. So the Bengals felt like there were intel told them there were a few teams that might think about the 6th round, so they decided a round earlier and make sure they got him because they had targeted him, they wanted him. And I think making the trade to get the additional 2 4th-round picks made that an easier decision to make, to draft the kicker in the 5th round. And, drafting a kicker, it's not the craziest thing in the world. I mean, it happens throughout the National Football League because they put points on the board. And this guy has a howitzer hanging off his right hip. I mean, he's got some unbelievable leg strength. And the thing about it, watching him, not only the distance, but the quick elevation. Sometimes guys, to get the extra distance, have to hit a 7-iron, more of a lower trajectory. He's still hitting wedges. I mean, he's still getting the ball up. So that's a good sign that, the line of scrimmage, extra points, long field goals, I should say. Extra points won't be an issue, but the longer field goals, he'll still be able to get some loft to the football. Like Justin Tucker. Tucker is just in a class by himself with the Baltimore Ravens. He gets immediate elevation on a 60-yard field goal attempt. It's crazy. Guys can't even get close to blocking it. So he may have some of that ability from what I saw. But again, there was no live rush or anything like that. But he just pure striking the football. It makes a little bit different sound when he kicks the football. You've been around. You've heard these guys, Dave. I mean, these pure guys when they punt, when they hit a football, the way they hit it, man, it's like the really talented golfer when he hits a golf ball as opposed to when we hit a golf ball. It sounds a lot different, and that's what McPherson's got. When he strikes the football, it's got a different sound to it.
Yeah, I stress to people all the time, covering the high school scene as I have for many years, when you come across a special kicker, because it's not what you see, it's what you hear.
No doubt.
And I remember seeing Pat McAfee down at the University of Cincinnati. There was a camp down there that wasn't a UC camp, but it was a different camp. It was a crappy, rainy, cold day. And all of a sudden you heard this boom every time Pat McAfee kicked the football, and you knew this guy was special.
Sure.
And I stress people all the time. If you go find a kicker, if you do not hear it, he's probably not as good as you think he is.
And the same thing, I remember Red's batting practice, going down there when Ken Griffey Jr. was there. Everybody's hitting and then Junior gets in the cage. Whew, different sound. I mean, when he makes the good, pure contact as opposed to other guys making good, pure contact, his sound's a lot different. It's like that with in just about every sport. There's no question about it.
Dave, I want to finish up on talking about that rookie minicamp. We talked, you had a couple podcasts talking about the draft leading up to it, and you've mentioned it. All the experts of the so-called draft anymore. There's many more, with TV being what it is. And even after the draft, the quick grades that come out, how a team did. When you get into these experts, so-called experts, giving a grade prior to seeing a minicamp and prior to actually seeing the pads put on in the group setting on their new team, how quickly do these people give out these grades that really don't mean nothing other than, what they project a guy to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a double-edged sword for the NFL. The draft has become a cottage industry for a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of draft gurus, a lot of draft experts. Of course, Mel Kiper's been doing it for darn near 4 decades now. So in Mel Kiper, for example, when the Bengals drafted Jackson Carman where they drafted him, he was like, "Oh, I had him as a late third, early 4th round pick." Well, good for you, Mel. And when Leatherwood got drafted, the 17th pick of the draft by the Raiders, heavily criticized. Mike Mayock, who was one of the draft gurus himself when he was working with NFL Network, he said, "Hey, no offense to you guys. I don't mean any offense, but we don't care what you think. We care what we think. Our talent evaluators know the offense that we're running, know the type of player we want to execute our offense. Sometimes guys don't fit, how they played in college, translating to what we want them to do in the National Football League is not a fit. So we know what we're looking for. We know the characteristics we want. And, God bless you guys, but we drafted who we think is best for us based on what we do. And that's what you have to do. I mean, when teams prep for the draft, if you look at their board, when they have players rated top 50, top 100, there's not a duplicate board of any 32 teams in the National Football League. And that's based on differences of opinion on how good guys are, differences of what we're going to be asking them to do to fit our system. Buffalo might not care what the Raiders or Bengals or whoever else, how they have players rated, because they're rating them based on what they do with their quarterback and their offense. So it's interesting. And when guys get offended, "Oh, I had him," so be it. The proof will be in the pudding 2 or 3 years down the road. I mean, every year every single draft, it's like when guys give A, B, C, D. It's incomplete. It's an incomplete grade until at least a lot of times you might find out with players their rookie year, but sometimes it's 2, maybe 3 years down the road. And there's nothing wrong with that. So the teams, the double-edged sword is that this cottage industry increases the popularity of the National Football League. It's a year-round enterprise now because, I mean, the draft coverage, they get better numbers in draft coverage than NBA playoff and Major League Baseball playoff games. It's amazing. And then the schedule, when the schedule's announced, they already know who they're playing. They just don't know when and where. And so now that schedule unveiling is another enterprise, and gets huge ratings. So that's the good. The bad is the teams are like, we don't want all this negative noise about it. We don't want Alex Leatherwood hearing that, why they drafted him. That's a stupid pick. Teams have to live with the good and the bad in that whole situation. So it's kind of an interesting thing to follow for sure.
We want to remind everybody you can get In the Trenches with Dave Lapham on YouTube, also wherever you get your podcast. We thank you for being with us.